Okay, so here we are with the Art of Mindful Medicine, episode number 31 with Dr. Liz Letchford. My name is Dr. Seth Gilson, a functional and holistic dentist, certified yoga teacher, and speaker. And Liz, thank you so much for being on here. I'm going to give you a quick intro and then we're going to jump into this. So Dr. Liz Letchford bridges movement and medicine to help her students find clarity through embodied strength training and myofascial release. She combines intuitive medicine with sports medicine to offer a somatic healing practice that allows students to find their connection between their physical body and their emotional body in order to move better and feel stronger. Liz has a master's in health and movement science, a PhD in kinesiology and rehabilitation science, is a board certified athletic trainer, and an EMT. It's a mouthful. And Liz's Instagram is at lizletchford.com. Or sorry, not .com, at Liz Letchford. All right, Liz. So we're going to start off like I always do with some gratitudes. Can you please share with us 3 things that you're grateful for today?
Okay, I'm grateful for my community. I have an incredible community, and I truly believe that community is what helps you elevate, like being able to see your reflection in someone else, be able to like bounce ideas off of each other. So I'm super grateful for my community. I'm super grateful for my health and this body. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my message here on this platform.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to rewind time a little bit. Can you go back and tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your childhood, where you're from, any specific memories that stand out? What are your origins?
Yeah. Well, I hail from Ruth and Stephen Letchford. Stephen's my father's British. My mom's Italian, which was hilarious growing up. My mom's like Italian American, and my father's like very posh British from Devon. And one thing that I remember is that culturally can be quite confusing. If you think of like Italians, like Italian from like Staten Island, New York Italian. I have like an Uncle Angelo, all right? And then I have my posh British side, which is very proper and like, eat with your knife and fork and put the fork down between chewing. And so it was very confusing growing up. So I remember this one story of my little brother. I have a little brother who's 4 years younger than I am. And my father would call the backyard the back garden, and my mother would call it the backyard. So for years, my brother would call when we would go out and play in the backyardin. And that's all you need to know about our childhood. It's just like this amalgamation of different cultures, which was a blessing. I grew up in Virginia. Nice. And when I would come home from school, I would watch like Trauma, Life in the ER, or all the medical shows. And so I've always been super insanely interested in anatomy and medicine and injury. And I would watch on repeat. There was this like 1980s robot cartoon situation that was like how to do CPR. And I would just come home and be so excited to watch it. So I've always had this part of me that was just like, I want to know what to do. It's going to be something to do in the medical field. And I'm a little bit different than other kids. Like instead of watching cartoons, I'm watching like robot CPR. So
for sure.
So that's how I grew up in the suburbs of Virginia.
Awesome. That's beautiful. No, I can definitely relate to that. My mom's been an ICU nurse since for as long as I can remember before I was born. So growing up with the medical shows and all that kind of stuff is something we definitely have in common. So is there any specific person that had an influence on your life growing up that you would like to mention? And why?
Yeah, my grandmother actually. Her name's Serena. She's still alive. She was a kindergarten and then a second grade teacher, and so I loved bragging when I was in second grade. Oh, my grandma is a second grade teacher, and so I feel like I got a little bit of a dual education, like a deep, rich education. She's very connected to plants and she loves gardening, and so she would bring that into her classroom. And in the summers, I would help her develop her classroom, and I got to get a little insight into what she was teaching that year, and got to play with the creatures that she had in terrariums. Like terrariums. And so it was really beautiful. I feel like I got double education during those years that are so influential. So I had my own kindergarten class and my own kindergarten teacher, but then I also had a grandmother in the summers who really understood that education and could provide me with just the best hands-on nature education. So she was all about nature and animals, and I attribute my love of the earth and plants to her, and so into those early days. So she's someone who really influenced me early on and continues to influence me.
Awesome. That's beautiful.
Mhm.
It's great to gain the wisdom from our elders in those ways.
Mhm.
And can you share a significant challenge that you've had to overcome in your life?
Sure, pick a category. Um, I think
I'll leave the category to you.
like, oh boy. I think my biggest challenge was actually myself and my own ego. I, I, for whatever reason, I grew up in a household where, I mean, I'm the oldest and I'm a girl. And so, if you're listening and you're the oldest and a girl, you might really, I grew up in a household where I felt like I struggled to be heard. And so I developed this fun little people pleasing mentality and this ego that relied on accolades and relied on validation. And so I just like got straight A's through school and was class president, and was like this perfect little like idea, this little avatar of what I thought perfection was. And so I like was holding on to this idea of like, I'm perfect and therefore I am lovable, versus I am me and therefore I am lovable. So that, putting that to death, bearing that idea and bearing that ego and bearing that, whatever that is, that shadow side of true perfection, which is loving what is in the moment, versus judging what is in the moment to this false idea of perfection, is probably the biggest challenge that I've had to overcome, but of course led to the biggest blessing, which is feeling so free in myself no matter what I'm doing, what I'm saying, which is quite the opposite of how I felt for a majority of my life.
No, that's great. It's funny. I'm as you're speaking, I'm kind of reflecting. I'm like, wow, we have very similar experiences, because I mean, we grew up in relatively similar cultures,
Yeah.
and it's just amazing how connected we all are, because we don't need to know the necessarily the specific details of each other's lives, but like just that summary is like, I feel like most people listening, obviously, like I'm saying myself, can definitely relate to that. And it's beautiful that sometimes we can turn those challenges or lack of awareness in our lives into our greatest gifts.
Yeah, always. That's what they're there for.
Right? Yeah, those lessons are there exactly like you said for that. So now moving on to sports medicine, when did you decide that this was the space for you, and where does your passion and inspiration come from?
Mm. One of my first jobs was a lifeguard, and I just remember feeling really fulfilled, knowing what to do in case of emergency. And I thought maybe I wanted to be a physical therapist because that was what I knew about in high school. We didn't have like a sports medicine program in high school. We just had sports. And I shadowed with a physical therapist for a couple days, and I was like, it's not this for me. It's definitely not just like seeing patient after patient in a clinic sitting under these LED lights. Like, this is not it for me. And I since know that there are different ways to work as a physical therapist, but as an 18-year-old, I did it.
Yeah.
And so then I learned about athletic training, which is so fun. You get to be, it's kind of like a lifeguard for sports. So you get to be on the field with the athletes, part of their team, responding to their injuries. So it's that immediate, like a lifeguard, like you're in trouble, I know what to do, versus with physical therapy, it's more like you've already had the injury, you're now in the rehabilitation process. So I really love sports medicine in that way and athletic training in that way, because you're on the field responding to the emergency.
Hmm.
knowing what to do, caring for someone in their deepest time of need, and then you get to follow them through the rehabilitative process. And on the other side of that, help with injury prevention. So that was so much more appealing to me. And so I found one of the best sports medicine programs, James Madison University in Virginia, applied, got in, and that started my love affair with the body and with injuries and with knowing about the anatomy and knowing about early on, I was really interested in the emotional component. We had just a few classes on the psychology of injury and sports psychology, but those were definitely some of my favorite classes. So looking back, it's funny. Now I'm really at the convergence of emotions and movement and emotions and injury. And so it's cool to look back and be like, "Oh, Liz, it was always in you. You
Hmm.
were always interested in it." So yeah, that's kind of the roots of it. We're just like I didn't want to be a physical therapist, so I stumbled upon athletic training.
No, that's great. It's something else I can relate to because I played Division I soccer, and I mean the trainers and they're really part of the team. I mean, they travel with us, they go everywhere. I mean, we see them just as much as the coaches, and it's really like you said, like a whole process of like before, in game, and post injury or anything. Like even if there isn't an injury, just kind of that recovery phase. Because I mean, we go through a lot in the game, so it's great to hear your end of that experience.
Mm. Yeah, I worked with soccer. I worked with Division I soccer actually, so I know the amount of work it takes at any level to be an athlete. And so it's cool. It's cool to hear from your side,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, a lot of people have no idea what trainers are. They think, oh,
Oh, yeah.
you're like fitness trainer, and it's like, no, it's a lot more. It's a board certified medical clinical profession, and so the athletic training profession as a whole is trying to dig itself out of the under the history of being tied to just being like a manager with that is carrying some band-aids and some water.
I was
So
just gonna say
yeah.
exactly the guy that in the golf cart that's not doesn't just have the ice and like the ace wrap.
Yeah,
It's a little bit more
exactly.
than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And are there any inspiring moments you can remember from being an athletic trainer, or in your rehab
Oh,
experience?
so many. Oh, so many.
Well, you can share a couple.
Yeah. One that sticks out to me is I worked when I was in graduate school. We had a trade with some of the local. I was in Richmond, Virginia, the inner city of Richmond, Virginia, Virginia Commonwealth University for my master's. And as part of that program, we were the athletic training graduate students were given to local high schools, and they were all inner city high schools. And so we had no budget. The schools that I worked for had actually no budget. We were asking for donations, and the kids came from like the projects. And so I got to see a side of athletics that simultaneously inspired me and broke my heart. I got to see, we would play schools from all over, some of which had immense resources, a very robust parent teacher association, and came from neighborhoods that had a lot more tax dollars to pull from. Um, and it was just, I found something within me that inspired me to fight for the justice for these students. I saw a lot of injustice in just the whole system that put these students in this situation anyways, and the injuries and the response to the injuries had to be dealt with in a very different way. It was different than my culture and the way that we responded to injuries. We had insurance and we went to the doctor and we had all this privilege. And um, I had a student who had an ACL tear because he jumped in front of a bullet for his father. Like very different than the culture I grew up in. I had a young woman who had a panic attack because of some trauma that happened to her, and it was something that I wasn't used to in my culture at the time. I'm like a 20-year-old graduate student, And my eyes really open to the breadth of the human experience, and the contributing factors to injuries, and how there's always more to be learned from different cultures. And I really built at first I was intimidated by these students. I was like, I have virtually nothing in common with them. They're going to think I'm this, blah, 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 fill in the blank. And eventually I was able to really connect with these students, and they got to feel that I really cared. And one of my favorite stories is one of the students felt that connection and was inspired to become an athletic trainer. And so I got to write him his recommendation to my undergraduate program. And so he became an athletic training student at my alma mater. And so to see that come full circle from like, wow, we're in this like really underprivileged situation at this school where we didn't even have, our track was dirt. Our track was dirt. We didn't even have a paved track, and we would go, and our bus was dilapidated, and our equipment was old. I was in charge of inspecting the safety of the equipment, and it was like just barely passing. And to see him come out of that was super awesome, and to see him be inspired by the work that is helping his community was so awesome. So it's really the people for me. It's really the people, and helping them find their truth and find their purpose through their bodies. And that's been a constant theme throughout my life. So yeah, man, I miss that school. It was so fun. It was so fun, and so different, and so rich, so rich.
And real, it sounds like.
Real.
It's just
like,
raw and real.
Raw and real. I had to make decisions like, your family can't afford you going to the doctor. So I have to take that into consideration, before being like, is this something that really, really requires you to go? So it was it was an interesting experience for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny because I mean, being an athlete and then now being a doctor on the other side of things, I didn't really put the two things together about how in your field and in general medicine, how the perspective of the other person is so important. And like understanding their story and making that connection is so vital to doing anything, whether it's getting them to understand why you're wrapping their ankle and why they need to leave it on, or why they need to ice or heat or whatever it is that they need to do, versus me, like why it is that the microbiome of your mouth is important, things like that. I mean, but just making those connections are so important. And it sounds like you really impacted some people there, and probably others that you don't even know about.
Yeah, I was Miss Liz. It was hilarious.
And how long were you there?
I was there for 2 years, and rotated between a couple of different schools. At one point, I had 3 schools that I was working for.
Oh, wow.
So I got to meet a lot of the students, and they knew each other. And yeah, it was beautiful. It was rich.
Awesome. That's beautiful. That really is beautiful. So change subjects a little bit, and we'll come back to more of what you do. But mindfulness, how would you say mindfulness, what does it mean to you?
To me, mindfulness is an awareness of your thoughts, an awareness of your behaviors, not being run by your subconscious programming, but instead really bringing to the forefront, being aware of the influences of your behavior, seeing them, and working to make a change for the better, so that it's beauty and light and goodness, that and conscious anger and conscious stress and conscious, bringing the subconscious to the conscious feels like mindfulness to me.
Yeah, it sounds like you're just describing bringing awareness to these different aspects of our lives, because we all go through these different emotions and experiences and what have you. But when we're, like, as you said, unconscious or unaware of the state that we're actually in, it's very, very, very different from the state of awareness in those moments.
Mhm.
And do you have any specific practices in your life? How do you incorporate mindfulness into your personal life?
Yeah, I meditate every day. I commune with what I call spirit every single day. I have an altar set up, and so my mornings start with just a beautiful meditation. There's also amazing work, breath work, or I have a very strong community, and they're all kind of in the mindfulness arena, spirituality, mindfulness arena. And so even just having conversations of, hey, this is what came up for me. I recognize my shadow and proclaiming it, saying it out loud, removing the shame around, hey, this is my subconscious, weird, unconscious, shadowy behavior, and I'm claiming it. So that actually has been most powerful, is witnessing my friends in their claiming of their shadows and seeing them work towards it, and also being witnessed in that. There's something really special about being witnessed in your anger and in your sadness and in your rage and in your like weird wobbles of the psyche. It To remove the shame around that makes it is just so liberating.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, these are some of our greatest learning moments in my experience, for
Yeah,
myself and for others.
yeah.
Um, it's really beautiful, and it's something that I always say: is vulnerability is the human superpower.
Mm,
And in those moments, those are our most vulnerable moments.
mm,
So, and obviously, being in a certain space with certain people is important, but um, I think I've learned to honor those moments in my own life.
beautiful.
Um, and in work, how do you incorporate mindfulness in the work that you do?
My I feel like the work that I do is mindfulness.
Okay.
So yeah, so I help people embody or find the places in their body where they have unconscious beliefs, where they might have some subconscious programming, bring it to the surface to be felt, to be expressed, to be moved through. Then on a somatic level, any injuries, any disconnections between one part of the body and the other, I really help them to become more embodied, to be aware of those connections. And so in that way, I'm trying to bring mindfulness to movement, trying to bring embodiment back to rehabilitation, and merging the mind and the body. So to me, mindfulness, it's not just in the mind. It's that mind body spirit connection that really makes it robust, and able to be a somatic experience.
No, that's great. As someone that's worked out quite consistently throughout my life, and as continue to now, being mindful and being present in those moments, and having these kind of experiences are so important when it comes to, and I'm just referring to the physical aspect of it, just being aware of the physical moments that we do are so, it's just another level of value when we're exercising, because then that's another reason how you prevent injuries.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And either on a conscious or a subconscious level, you're being aware of how your body's moving. You think about like, okay, I'm going to move my hand to here. Like I'm learning a dance move. Or if you're just in a soccer game, your body naturally is moving places, and if there's a disconnect, if you're worried about what, your boyfriend or girlfriend are doing, or you're worried about this thing that you got to do later, or your job, or that's all going to create an energetic disconnect in your body, and that makes you more susceptible to injury. It's less about hip strength and ankle mobility and the biomechanics of what's going on, and it's truly more about the energy and the emotion and how that affects the musculoskeletal system.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, obviously the physical aspect, but how do you, what are some of the ways that you get people to understand that psycho-emotional aspect, and that kind of oneness within themselves when they're doing these things? Because it's very easy for our minds to wander, so even in meditation. I mean, and it happens, it's normal, it's not like we can stop that from happening. But what are some of the ways you, I guess the word that's coming to me is, coach people back to the moment in which they're at?
Yeah, it just takes practice. And for me, I love coaching people through feeling the sensations in their body. So I'll have them do a movement, maybe it's a rehabilitative movement, maybe it's a strengthening movement, and I'll help them connect. Okay, what do you feel right now? What are the sensations you feel right now? Can you say you're doing a lat pull down, for example? Can you connect your lat into your core? Can you feel how your lat's connected to your strong core? And that provides a strong, stable foundation. So your shoulder has something strong to attach to. Cool. What's your core connected to? Your hips and your feet, right? All the way down your legs. Can you anchor that core now into the ground? So I help people start to become more comfortable with connecting and feeling the whole body. So that when they're in the moment, whether it's, they're running to dodge traffic or whatever in an emergency, or they're in their sport, or they're, playing out with friends, having a good time, dancing on the dance floor, that they have the practice of that full embodied sensation. So it's more like you do the work in the gym so that you can just not think about it in life.
And just be you and just have fun.
Just have
And
fun, just play. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's great. And what are some of the impacts on our health that mindfulness has, right? Whether it's spiritual leading to a benefit or the physical aspects?
Anecdotally, I know there's literature around this, but anecdotally, I see a reduction in stress. I see an improvement in what I'll call the fluidity of tissues. So there's less rigidity when your body feels like it's safe to be fully felt, and when you're aware of your body. So you never thought of your little pinky. Your pinky would be stiff, and it wouldn't be fully integrated into your body. So the same goes for all of your body parts. A lot of people have trouble connecting to their feet and to their hips. And so once we start doing that, it becomes a little bit more supple. You become aware of it. And so I see a reduction in pain, and or an improvement in body awareness, which leads to a reduction in injuries.
Great. Yeah, no, and that's very much been my experience from again, the spiritual side to the physical side. Cultivating that awareness definitely leads to more calmness, less injuries, just overall less stress. I never thought about it as the fluidity, like the body fluidity, and or the how did you say, the kind of the, I guess that you said like fluid move better in the body, things like that?
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever had a motion where you kind of feel like there's this like there's this. A lot of people have it in their spine, like when they tuck or untuck their spine. If there's a lack of connection to the fluidity of the segmentation of the spine, they'll get this like jagged kind of motion where it's like, oh. And so
That has definitely
being
happened to me.
yeah, so being with that helps to improve that fluidity, so that now your body is aware. Instead, basically, you're trying to speed up your motion, but your brain can only stay with it very slow. So it actually allows for fluidity and improves speed in motion, in movement.
So are there any other health benefits that you've personally seen with clients or patients from mindfulness practices?
Yeah. By bringing the mind and all the stories that we create in our mind and feeling them in the body, it helps to transmute it. And simultaneously, by understanding that the ailments of our body are oftentimes created because of that disconnect between the mind and the body, between the spirit and the emotion, spiritual body and the emotional body. Even just having people understand that and see that for themselves gives them their power back. And so because they're allowed to now be in the driver's seat of their body and of their mind, now they're not looking outside of themselves for answers. Yes, I'm going to help shepherd you into your own healing. I've studied the language of the body, so I can help translate things for you. So in that way, I'm more of your mentor or your teacher rather than your healer or your guru or your coach. Or, I exist to help you translate your body, understand the language of your body so that you can communicate with it and ultimately heal yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that way, every single person that I've worked with has been able to take their power back. And in that way, think about a time when you were powerless and how you felt in your body and in your mind and how that feels. And then think of a time when you felt you were in your power. So that's the difference that I see when adopting and adapting this protocol and this mentality to movement, to rehabilitation, to the mindfulness
Mm-hmm.
of movement and injury recovery.
All right, great. And so moving on to more of what you do now, we went over some of your passions and inspirations, but we all have times of feeling kind of burnt out or we come to crossroads. What is your overarching why that you come back to at your core when you get to these spaces?
Yeah, my why is just that, is to help people realize that they have the extraordinary capacity to heal themselves. Like seeing that is, I feel like, the reason why I'm here. Helping people discover that is the reason why I'm here. And so anytime that I feel like lazy or I don't want to do this or, I remember what re-energizes me is not, oh, I'm going to make money from this or, oh, I'm going to be seen in this. It's, oh, no. I'm going to help someone come back to themselves. And that's what energizes me the most.
Great. And what do you find that people are reaching out for you most now? And like what is your kind of calling now that you are helping people with now?
That whole picture, whole body. It's like it's almost every single email I receive or every single phone call I receive is, I've seen every physical therapist, every doctor. I felt particularly drawn to you, Liz. I feel like I'm not interested in just looking hot in a bikini. Like I actually want to move better, and I want to. There's a reclamation that I feel is a deep desire of mine, and so which is so awesome, which is so beautiful that it's almost comical. I'm like, oh, here's the same email again. And therefore, if you're listening and that's how you're feeling, like, send me that email. I love receiving it. Because that's where I sit is, yeah, there's a lot of practitioners who are talented, who have studied, but there's an intuitive component that a lot of people who are rooted in just science they're afraid of. They're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid to not have a system or a structure for every single decision that they make. And ultimately that comes back to not trusting yourself. And so we all have an innate intuition, and my journey has allowed me to tap into my innate intuition. And through that intuition, combined with my background in sports medicine, allows me to really see the whole person and to help them tap into that in themselves. And so a lot of people come to me because they have this sense. I don't know why I think this, but I just have this feeling. And I'm like, baby, that's your intuition. We celebrate that. I have this feeling that it's deeper than just a structural issue with my knee or this back pain. I've had surgeries and physical therapies and I've done all the hip exercises and I've done all the rehab, and I just have this feeling that it's deeper than that. And so I can touch all layers. I touch on the rehab. We do the exercises, but we also address the biopsychosocial spiritual component of the injury. There is an energetic, there is an emotional component to every injury. To every ailment, whether it was the root cause of that injury or that disease, or it's now magnetized an emotion. Think of the last time you were injured.
Mm-hmm.
It's frustrating, right? Why did you get that injury? were you really stressed at school? I worked with a lot of high school athletes. Were you really stressed at school and your body was feeling depleted and under-resourced, and then you sprained your ankle? Okay, let's talk to the adrenals. All right, let's get you feeling really good. Otherwise, you're going to go back out there and re-sprain your ankle because there's a disconnect between your brain and how quickly it's gonna pull you out of that almost sprain motion. We call it proprioception. And so to be able to see and address all aspects of that is really powerful from a rehabilitative perspective.
Yeah, it's great to hear that. I mean, it's something, a theme for me over this past week. I'm just thinking outside the box and not being confined by that box. Like you said, that so many practitioners are just, this is the problem. These are the steps you need to take. And if these doesn't work for you, I can't do anything for you. And that kind of I feel like that leaves people a little bit hopeless. And like you said, you get a lot of these emails that it's very repetitive kind of stories or asks coming to you.
Yeah. It's not, we're humans. We're not, it's impossible for us to be defined to a box or a diagnosis. And how many stories have you heard of, like, oh, 5 doctors told me I was this, but really it was this. Like, that happens all the time. So that's to put all of your trust, to put all of your belief in a diagnosis just because it fits the system doesn't allow for the nuances that are innate in our human experience. I mean, we're all so unique and so different, and someone's knee pain might be a result of childhood trauma that they had when they were younger. Some might be a result of a catastrophic injury. Some might be a result of a high arch in their foot. Some might be a result of a situation that's going on with their hips. And to be able to zoom out and look at the whole body and be able to understand and listen to the person behind the injury is something that I'm really passionate about and hope to teach other practitioners and inspire other practitioners to do.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. And obviously we're talking about some changes and that people can make in their life in order to kind of reach a different space. But how do these kind of lifestyle choices contribute to one's own health? And how do you, I guess not how do you, but sometimes these deeper issues are much more difficult to get to initially. So in my experience, I find that starting with the physical, getting somebody into their body and kind of out of their head, so to speak, is a great way to start making changes. So how do you approach the initial phases of making changes so you can reach those deeper spaces to kind of find the root of whatever is going on?
First, it starts with trust. So building trust between me and the patient, building trust between the patient and their own body. So oftentimes, a majority of the time, I'm starting with their breath, helping them to drop their breath out of their shoulders and into their lungs, and having them feel the embodied sense of a true deep inhale where it's relaxed, tapping into their parasympathetic. And sometimes that's it. Sometimes we just start there for a couple of sessions. Let's just practice breathing. Let's get you connected to your pelvic floor. Let's get you connected to your diaphragm. Notice what it feels like, the difference between this breath and the qualities and what's happening in your nervous system. So once I establish trust, it just builds upon there. So trust of their body, trust of their breath, trust of their intuition, and that trust starts to grow until they become their own healer and they can truly trust and listen to their body.
Okay. And I mean, I imagine you come and meet people that have never really been into fitness or exercise much and things like that. What are a few recommendations you have when you initially meet someone that's trying to start exercising, to try and get that motivation, trying to kind of change their lifestyle?
Yeah, start slow. I say this often. I say only go as fast as your slowest part. The fitness culture can be very toxic in that it's like, in order to be a fitness person, you have to like do 1 million burpees and like show up at the gym 7 days a week, which isn't true. And our bodies really need a slow ramp up. Like in anything that we do, we have to have this nice linear progression. That's not an exponential growth. There are very few things in the body that are exponential. And so, yeah, I just allow people to meet themselves where they are. And it doesn't have to, getting rid of comparison of to anybody else, even comparison to their past self can be really powerful. And just, yeah, who are you right now? What does that person need? What does that body need? And let's go from there, rather than trying to hold on to any past or future projections.
Yeah, because I imagine a lot of people come to you with goals, and whether it's a physical goal or whatever. But some people want strength, some people want endurance, some people want pain relief, some people want flexibility. It's like, how do you, I mean, those are very different things for very different bodies. So like, what are some of the ways that you kind of go about explaining to people and kind of getting people into the right mindset of where they're going to go from, like, where's step 1 to like step 10?
Yeah. Regardless of anybody's goal, what I tell them is, in order to reach that goal, we could take 2 approaches. I could take where you are right now, do a bunch of, say it's flexibility, do a bunch of flexibility exercises, completely ignore the emotional component, and you'll see some improvement, but eventually you'll devolve back to where you were to begin with. But if we take it slow and we get you back to the foundation, we unbury all of these things and we remove all of these things that are not your essence, that are learned things or conditional things or trauma or beliefs that people projected onto you. If we unwind the emotional, we unwind the fascia, we do some myofascial release, we get you back to your parasympathetic, calm, home-based state, and then build strength upon that, build endurance, whatever their goal is, flexibility, strength, whatever it might be. That's where we'll see real changes. So once I get people to understand that and buy into that, it's game over, because now their goal is not, I really want strength and I'm not strong. It's, ooh, I want to get to I want to unwind everything that's in the way of me having it be really easy to access strength. Because once your body's communicating, your feet are communicating with your brain, and your heart is communicating with your hands, and all of that, your shoulder blade is communicating with your core. Once all of that's communicating, now I don't have to watch your form, because your body's doing it naturally. You see athletes who are like natural athletes, that's what's happening. Their body is just naturally doing what it's supposed to do. So instead of me watching every move and correcting, 3 degrees to the left, which is what I started out as with a PhD in biomechanics, it was all about angles and joints and, you're doing it wrong, which doesn't feel good. What I learned through addressing the emotional component is, when you melt all of that away, bodies in general, all bodies, regardless of your fitness history, want to move correctly. That's their home base. That's their homeostasis. All bodies want is to maintain homeostasis. So if we can bring that baseline level down to what's nourishing for the body, what's safe for the body, then the body's going to do exactly what it needs to do. And you can easily adjust it. Say, I want to have bigger biceps. Great. That's super easy. Now, from this place where your body's not resisting that from an emotional or a spiritual or a physical perspective.
No, that's great. That was a really great overview of the game. I was actually able to picture that change it for, I mean, obviously I was picturing myself, but going through that, it's really beautiful.
You can feel that, right? Like there's for me, like when I would show up in the gym before I had this revelation, before I had this perspective, I would show up to the gym, and every time I would do deadlifts, my back would hurt. And I was get so frustrated at it. And it wasn't until I took a break, figured out like, I've got this thing from my childhood I have to process. Now I can do deadlifts till the cows come home and my back doesn't hurt. So my glutes are getting stronger. My hamstrings are getting stronger. My whole body. It was like, if I could just address the emotional component, now I'm not fighting against this protective mechanism that's innate in my physiology. So that's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, the word you used before, it keeps coming to mind for me, is fluid. And it just, it once you unlock those certain aspects emotionally, and then that kind of translates to the physical unlocking and becoming more fluid. Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of different philosophies surrounding these ideas, and different people have different approaches, like you had mentioned before. But what are some of the ways that you navigate the differences between like the Eastern and Western philosophies?
You know, I have such a deep respect for both. I believe they are more powerful together. There's ancient wisdom and technology in the Eastern practices. Once you unlock, as a clinician, once you unlock your intuition and your ability to sense the body and its energy, you understand the Chinese meridians. You understand the flow of qi. You understand why Ayurveda works the way that it does. But until you trust yourself and stop relying on other people to tell you how to heal, you can only trust the Western systems. So I feel like people who are able to integrate both have transcended the Western is the devil because they don't get it and they're not intuitive, and the Western side being like, that feels really woo-woo, I don't trust it, there's no science around it. Both of which are very untrue. There's a lot of science around the chakra system. There's a lot of science around the meridians and acupuncture. But what I've noticed with the Western, I mean, I was in the Western philosophy. I was in like the deepest scientific culture that really laughed at anything Eastern, that laughed at anything that wasn't peer reviewed. Science is just our ability to measure the magic, right? Being intuition, being energy. And so imagine you have this like magical thing happening, and the peer-reviewed journals and the peer-reviewed articles and the measurements that we take are just our observations of the magic, are just our observations of the meridians of the body, are just our observations of the little nuanced emotional component of this person's health. And so in that way, it's really hard to capture in numbers and in angles this very amorphous, intuitive, constantly moving experience that is the human experience. And so if we place all of our trust in the science and in the numbers, then we're missing a huge component of it. It has to be both. It has to be, great, there's a system I've developed. Science is just creating a hypothesis, observing that hypothesis, and testing it. Okay, so it's this constant cycle of like, I observe something, I'm coming up with I think this is what's going on, and now let me test it. So it has to be that constant cycle of observing and questioning. But what happens is the scientists stop there for some reason.
I was gonna say they only take you part of the way.
They only take the confirming or denying the hypothesis, and they forget the whole part of the scientific method, that's curiosity and observation. And it's a constant cycle of, we don't know, so let's find out. And so that fear, and I get it, it's really scary to not know, especially when your ego, I lived there, that was my biggest thing, when your ego relies on knowing and being the person who knows. I'm the person who knows, and anything else is completely in opposition to my ego. Okay, very threatening. And so I've been there. And so, yeah, I just think science is magic and magic is science. And Eastern and Western can live in harmony as long as we understand that science is just trying to measure what a lot of the Eastern wisdom has measured intuitively. It's a deep science, and the earth is amazing, and nature is amazing, and everything is here we live in an ecosystem that's designed to help us thrive. And so, you know, so it's like there are plants, and most of our medications are derived from plants, you know, are derived from ancient Eastern wisdom that was there to begin with. From Amazonian jungle plants come aspirin, come ibuprofen. And so, if we're able to say, who are we to deny the benefit, who to deny the existence of these ancient wisdoms and ancient traditions, which are designed for our health? Yeah,
it
it's
it
beautiful.
does it does seem a little foolish to kind of turn our noses up to certain things like Chinese medicine, which is like the oldest form of medicine in the world, and like you said, Ayurveda and things like that. Yes, some of the traditional treatments or ways of viewing things might not make a lot of sense to people, but just because it doesn't make sense doesn't mean you just completely dismiss it.
Exactly. Bingo. Totally. And it's funny. It's like it used to not make sense to me. I used to be there I was such a skeptic. I was even skeptical of my own skepticism. Like, I would get acupuncture and I'd be like, well, I don't feel anything happening. And I would, I would take my own before and after. So we've all done this. You'd be like, well, I don't feel really okay. Maybe I feel different, but maybe that's all in my head. And now that I can tune into the energy system, again, that intuition. I can feel where in your body with my hands. I can feel the energy system. The meridians make sense to me now. It's just like, just because, yeah, we're just unable to see it or sense it yet doesn't mean it's not real.
Exactly. Yeah. And so taking these different philosophies and how you've merged them together in your life, if you were to go back to teaching, how would you do things differently?
Yeah. Even when I was so when I was a graduate assistant at the master's and PhD level, part of that responsibility is to teach the undergrad students. And it was so fun. I love teaching. And I was teaching a particular curriculum that was set for me. But what I would teach first is for these practitioners, and I was teaching in the sports medicine curriculum, athletic training curriculum, and the kinesiology curriculum. I would teach these practitioners how to tap into their own intuition before anything, how to trust themselves before they then trust the system and give all their power away. So that's the first thing that I would do. And yeah, teach them how to feel it in themselves. A lot of healers, a lot of people in the healing arts or people who get into medicine, they have this desire to know what to do about the body, and that gets adulterated because then they project it on everyone else and they ignore their own bodies. So I would teach people how to feel and how to be embodied in themselves so that they can really relate to their patients rather than being the authority figure over their patients and having this false sense of power. Um, and this ego boost that comes from having the knowledge and being the wisdom. Yeah, and then I would help them tap into that energetic intuition where they can really connect with another person. That's something that can be learned. That's something that can be activated, and it's something we're not teaching in the Western schools.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Um, so are there any other emotional components behind the things that you do that you can share with us that you haven't already kind of touched on, or even your own personal emotional kind of like how you show up? Because
Hmm.
obviously, I mean, your energy has to be very grounded and centered when you're going to do this work with people. So, what are some of the things that kind of go on behind the scenes, so to speak?
Yeah, I had to make a huge lifestyle shift. Once my intuition came online, once I really was able to sense and feel the energy of other people, um, I realized how sensitive that made me, and how I could no longer, because my medicine as a human, my thing to share with the world is not to abandon your body. I could no longer abandon my body. So I left a job that was really fun. Um, we actually all got laid off. It was perfect, but I had planned on leaving before then, but I was just like, thanks, universe. They closed down. I work for a company that was on camera fitness, and they closed our entire LA studio. So the same day that I was gonna chat with my manager about, hey, my body actually can't do this anymore. I'm showing up and I'm exercising on camera and like exerting myself in a way that my system is telling me no. Was the same day we all got laid off. So it was kind of like, oh, okay. Thanks, everyone. So I completely changed my lifestyle. And then I have to be really, really diligent about my own energetic practices, my boundaries, the nutrition, the food, the substances I put in my body. I work with a dear friend who's a Chinese medicine doctor, and there's certain herbs that will help support when I'm giving my energy, when I'm using my energy in a energy work session. There's certain herbs. I have my protocol. I have like my bone broth, and I have my herbs and my ginseng available afterwards to help restore my own chi, my own energy. Otherwise, I cannot give from a depleted place. And so I will actually, it's only happened once, but I'll actually reschedule a session if I feel like I'm depleted, because it's not in service to anybody.
Well, that's something you don't hear a lot of practitioners say.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's a decision that I made. And previously I would abandon myself. I would show up to a session and just put on a happy face. But when you're working on the energetic level and it's so subtle, all of that is available in the field. And so, I can't be dishonest with myself or with my patients, as to like, here's how I'm showing up today. So it's to everyone's benefit to be like, you know what, today I just need to rest and meditate, and then let's just reschedule this for tomorrow. And it's always been super well received. And there's a respect there of like, I'm doing this for you, for your good, and not abandoning myself. And in that way, it's always given the other person permission to do the same. Unfortunately, we live in a culture, we live in a society that demands us from 9 to 5, even if our energy doesn't want to do that. And so I've made the conscious decision to leave that paradigm and to be able to work on my own schedule when my body is able to do it. I'm able to see clients as often or as seldom as necessary, depending on how my energy is. And so I'm pristine. I'm pristine with my energy practices. I have to be. I will go to, like, if there's a social event, I'll feel into whether I can handle that. If I have a client the next day, I won't go. Like, I have to preserve my energy because that's a lot of energy. And so, yeah, so in that way, like, making sure that I'm exercising, making sure that I'm taking care of my own body is number one now. I used to not be. I used to abandon the shit out of my body, but now I cannot.
Yeah,
So,
no, I'm 100% there with you. You got to fill up your cup.
yeah.
So, one of the things you said to me previously, and that you just brought up again a little bit, or you mentioned, and it really stood out to me, is science is measuring the magic. What does that mean?
Yeah. So we chatted about this a little bit earlier, but I'll go more into depth. So one thing that I noticed, the more that I investigate, the more energetic the spiritual realms. I recently went down to Ecuador, to the Amazon, and I just wanted to learn from the elders, wanted to learn from the native shamans and the keepers of that land, because they're so in tune with the land. They're so in tune with bodies, and there's this wisdom that's been passed on for centuries. And I kind of wanted to like shake off the old Western paradigm and really learn from these people. So humbly went down and learned from them. And it was so interesting for them to notice, okay, from an energetic level, this person comes and has a rash, and so then they take the bark from this tree, they boil it down into a tea, and they help heal the rash. They learned that through a deep communion with the plants. They learned that by not trial and error. Let me test all the plants on this rash. There's not enough time in the world to do that. But instead, they had this sense, this intuitive sense. I think this bark is going to help with this rash. And so that's magic, okay, or intuition or energy. And science can measure the efficacy of this bark on this rash as compared to everything else. So in this way, the indigenous people who have had this wisdom, have had this intuition, are doing this anyways. And then scientists are observing this happening and saying, okay, cool, I respect that. Let's measure it just so that we have that. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but in that way, the science is measuring the magic. And the work that I do on an energetic level, right? I'm having people express their deepest anger, and then they feel better. They happen to have their labs tested. And so it's like, yeah, this anger, this emotional release practice works as measured by this lab, as measured by the amount of circulating cortisol in their bodies. So in that way, they can coexist. It's like, yes, my chi is running effectively as measured by all of my labs being healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can think of magic as measured by science, then they can coexist, and they're not at odds with one another.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's great because I can only speak for myself, right? I relate to it totally, and I can understand these things, but until people actually experience these things, some people just won't fully get there.
I get it.
And that's okay.
Yeah, I get
But
it.
I mean, these things are very real, and it's a beautiful experience. So I highly recommend anybody watching kind of move into the space where you can explore these and have some of these kind of experiences. So thank you for that. I want to start wrapping up here. And in closing, I always do this at the end. So if this was the last time you ever had to share your thoughts, and you could only share 3 things that people should start implementing in their lives immediately to improve their health, what would they be?
Oh, wow. Listen to your body. It's very wise. Oh gosh, 3 things, no pressure. Yeah, absolutely listen to your body. Stay curious about everything. Stay curious about everything. And don't underestimate the power of gratitude.
100%.
I
100%.
think that covers everything that I want.
Well,
Yeah.
it's true, because I mean that's why I start with gratitude. Because no matter what's going on before or after, I mean, it brings you to now, right? And it reminds us. Okay. So can you just give us a quick recap of your business, location, courses, projects, whatever you're working on, the best way that people can reach out to you? Obviously, your Instagram is at Liz Letchford. That's LIZLETCHFORD. And that'll be in the show notes so everybody can see that. But what are some other outlets for you?
Yeah, just you can find me at lizletchford.com. If my work or my practice resonates with you at all, just send me a message. There's a way to contact me. If you join my mailing list, I'm in the process of developing a group class that kind of incorporates some of the magic we talked about today. The ability to get into your body, to get out of your head, and to tune into your own internal wisdom. So I'll be coming out with some projects and some classes associated with that. So I hope that you join me. I hope that if anything resonated, that that you'll reach out and just be part of this community.
Beautiful. Thank you. And as always, if you're watching, comments, feedback, suggestions are always welcome and appreciated. All the episodes are on my YouTube channel, this YouTube channel, The Art of Mindful Medicine. And you can also check out my website, www.mindful.doctor. And then, of course, on Instagram at mindful.doctor. So I like to end with a quote. And I think, Liz, you're going to recognize this. If you feel like giving up because you're not seeing results, remember this. The last thing to grow on a fruit tree is the fruit.
I love that quote.
Yeah, I saw that, and I don't know who said it. I don't know if it was yours or what, but I loved it. It's so true. So thank you so much for being on here. I really appreciate it. Everybody, thank you for watching, and like and subscribe. That you know how to do those things down there, and we'll be back with the next episode soon.